Emma Whitmore pressed her calloused hands against the rough wood of the barn door and listened to her father's voice crack with rage inside the parlor. The wealthy cowboy from the Brooks Ranch had come to choose a bride, and her father had spent every penny they didn't have dressing Lydia in silk and pearls. Emma had scrubbed floors until her knees bled, prepared the feast, and stayed out of sight like she'd been told. But when Wyatt Brooks walked past her perfect sister without a second glance and pointed directly at Emma with those steel-gray eyes, everything her father had planned shattered in an instant. If you want to see how this impossible choice changes everything, subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Emma didn't move from her position outside the parlor window. Her father's voice thundered through the thin walls, each word hitting harder than the last. You will go back in there and tell him there's been a mistake. Tell him you're not available. Tell him anything, but you will not ruin this family's last chance at survival. Emma's sister Lydia spoke next, her voice tight with something Emma couldn't quite name. She didn't do anything, Father. He chose her. What was she supposed to do? She was supposed to stay invisible like I told her to. She was supposed to let you shine. But no, she had to stand there with dirt on her dress and make him think she was some kind of frontier woman worth claiming. Emma closed her eyes. She'd been carrying firewood when Wyatt Brooks first saw her. She hadn't known he was there, hadn't known her father had positioned Lydia in the front parlor, like a painting meant to be admired. She'd just been doing what she always did, working while everyone else prepared for something she'd never be part of. The front door opened behind her. Emma turned to find Wyatt Brooks standing on the porch, his hat in his hands, his expression unreadable. Your father's got a lot to say about my choice, he said. His voice was deep, rougher than the smooth-talking ranch hands who sometimes came through town. Figured I should hear what you have to say about it. Emma straightened her spine. I didn't ask to be chosen. I know that. Wyatt stepped closer. That's part of why I chose you. You don't know anything about me. I know you were carrying enough firewood to break most men's backs. I know you didn't flinch when I walked past your sister. And I know you're not standing here begging me to change my mind. He tilted his head slightly. Am I wrong about any of that? Emma's hands curled into fists at her sides. What do you want from me? I want a partner, not a decoration. Not someone who's going to fall apart the first time a horse needs breaking or a fence needs mending. Wyatt's gray eyes held hers steady. My father thinks I need a wife to make the ranch look respectable for investors. I think I need someone who won't run when things get hard. You look like someone who knows hard. The words should have felt like an insult, but they didn't. Emma had spent her entire life being told she wasn't pretty enough, refined enough, worthy enough to be seen. This man was telling her she was exactly what he needed because she was strong. My father will never agree to this, Emma said quietly. Your father doesn't have a choice. The agreement was that I'd pick one of his daughters. I picked you. Wyatt placed his hat back on his head. Question is whether you'll come willingly or if I need to carry you out of here while he's still raging inside. Emma's breath caught. You can't be serious. I don't joke about things like this. I need an answer, Emma Whitmore. Will you come with me or not? Inside the house, her father's voice rose again. She's worthless. She always has been. Take Lydia. She's everything a man like you should want. Something cracked open inside Emma's chest. 23 years of being invisible, being worthless, being the daughter who wasn't quite right. And here was a man who looked at her and saw strength instead of failure. I'll come, she said. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. But I won't be some trophy you parade around to prove something to your father. Wyatt's mouth curved slightly. Wouldn't dream of it. The parlor door burst open. Richard Whitmore stood in the doorway, his face purple with rage. "Emma, get inside this house right now!" Emma didn't move. For the first time in her life, she stood her ground. "She's coming with me, Mr. Whitmore." Wyatt's voice carried the weight of finality. "The agreement stands." "I'll have the sheriff—" The agreement was witnessed by Judge Morrison and signed by both our fathers. "You want to break that contract? You explain to the judge why your word isn't worth the paper it's written on." Wyatt turned slightly toward Emma. "Get whatever you need. We leave in 10 minutes. Emma walked past her father without looking at him. Lydia stood in the parlor, her beautiful dress suddenly looking like a costume she'd been forced to wear. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Emma saw something flash across her sister's face. Not anger, but something closer to envy. "You're really going?" Lydia asked. "I'm really going. You don't love him. You don't even know him." Emma picked up the small bag she kept under her bed, the one that held her mother's wedding ring and the few possessions that actually mattered. "No, but he sees me. That's more than anyone else in this house has ever done." Lydia's perfect composure cracked. "What am I supposed to do? Father spent everything on this plan. If you leave, if this fails, it's not failing. He got exactly what he wanted. His daughter is marrying into the Brooks family." Emma fastened the bag closed. "It's just not the daughter he planned on." "You're being selfish." The accusation stung, but Emma forced herself to stay steady. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm finally choosing something for myself instead of being what everyone else needs me to be." She walked out of the room before Lydia could respond. Her father blocked the doorway, his hand raised as if he might physically stop her. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer my daughter." Emma met his eyes. "I stopped being your daughter the day Mother died, and you decided Lydia was the only one worth saving." She pushed past him. Wyatt was waiting by his horse, his expression careful and controlled. He helped her into the saddle behind him without a word, his movements efficient and practiced. Richard Whitmore stepped onto the porch. "You'll regret this, Emma. You think he's different, but men like him only want one thing. When he's done with you, you'll come crawling back, and I won't be here to save you." Emma tightened her grip on the saddle. Wyatt turned his horse toward the road. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "No," Emma said honestly. "But I will be." They rode in silence for nearly an hour. The Whitmore estate disappeared behind them, swallowed by dust and distance. Emma's hands ached from gripping the saddle too hard, but she didn't let go. If she let go, she might fall apart completely. "You want to talk about it?" Wyatt asked finally. "Not particularly." "Fair enough." He shifted slightly in the saddle. "But you should know what you're getting into. My father's ranch is 3 times the size of your family's property. We run cattle, horses, and enough land to keep 20 men working full-time. It's not easy work." "I'm not afraid of work." "I know. That's why I chose you." Wyatt glanced back at her. "But it's not just the work. My father's got expectations. He wants this marriage to look proper for his business partners. That means dinners, social events, putting on a show." Emma's stomach tightened. "I'm not good at putting on shows." "Then we won't. We'll do what works for us and let everyone else figure out how to deal with it." The simplicity of his words caught Emma off guard. "You make it sound easy." "It won't be, but I'd rather have someone real beside me than someone playing a part they hate." Wyatt pulled his horse to a stop near a small creek. "We should rest here. Give the horses water." Emma slid down from the saddle, her legs stiff from riding. She walked to the creek's edge and knelt, splashing cold water on her face. When she looked up, Wyatt was watching her with that same careful expression. "You're wondering if you made a mistake," he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know what I'm wondering." Emma sat back on her heels. "This morning I was nobody. Now I'm supposed to be your wife, and I don't even know your middle name." "James. Wyatt James Brooks." He crouched beside her. "And you're not nobody. You never were. Your family just couldn't see past their own desperation long enough to notice.
How did you see it? You were there for maybe 20 minutes.
Wyatt picked up a smooth stone from the creek bed, turning it over in his hands. My mother died when I was 12. After that, my father threw himself into building the ranch, making it bigger, making it matter. He forgot he had a son who needed him. So I learned to take care of myself. I learned to see the people who were actually working instead of the ones who were just performing. He tossed the stone into the water. You were working. Your sister was performing. Wasn't a hard choice. Emma's throat tightened. Your father sent you to find a wife to make the ranch look respectable. What's he going to say when you bring home the wrong daughter? He'll say whatever he wants. Won't change anything. Wyatt stood and offered her his hand. Come on, we've got another hour before we reach the ranch. Emma took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His grip was calloused and strong, the hand of someone who'd spent years working beside his men instead of just giving orders. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The sun was setting when the Brooks Ranch came into view, sprawling across the valley like something out of a dream Emma had never allowed herself to have. Fences stretched in perfect lines, cattle dotted the hillsides, and the main house stood 3 stories tall, with a wraparound porch that seemed to go on forever. It's bigger than I thought, Emma said quietly. It's bigger than it needs to be. My father likes making statements. Wyatt guided the horse toward the barn. Most of the ranch hands live in the bunkhouse behind the main house. We keep a separate kitchen there. The main house is just for family and whatever guests my father decides to torture with his presence. A man stepped out of the barn, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw Wyatt. Didn't expect you back so soon, boss. Change of plans, Marcus. Wyatt dismounted and helped Emma down. This is Emma Whitmore. She'll be staying. Make sure the guest room in the east wing is ready. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Your father's in his study. He's been asking about you. I bet he has. Wyatt's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Come on, Emma. Might as well get this over with. Emma followed him into the house, her heart pounding harder with each step. The interior was exactly what she expected. Expensive furniture, paintings that probably cost more than her family's entire estate, and a cold elegance that felt more like a museum than a home. They found Wyatt's father in his study, surrounded by ledgers and contracts. James Brooks Sr. looked up when they entered, his sharp eyes immediately fixing on Emma with obvious disapproval. This is not Lydia Whitmore, he said flatly. No, this is Emma Whitmore, her sister. Wyatt's voice carried no apology. I chose her instead. The silence that followed felt dangerous. James Brooks stood slowly, his gaze moving from Emma to his son and back again. You chose the wrong one. I chose exactly who I wanted. That girl is a nobody. She has no social standing, no refinement, no connections worth. She can work harder than any ranch hand we've got. She doesn't fall apart when things get difficult. And she's honest. Wyatt cut his father off with cold precision. That's worth more than all the social standing in the territory. James Brooks's face darkened. You think you're so smart, making decisions that affect this entire operation without considering the consequences. This marriage was supposed to open doors for us. The Whitmore name still carries weight in certain circles. The Whitmore name is drowning in debt and everyone knows it, Wyatt said. The only reason Richard Whitmore agreed to this arrangement was because he's desperate. Any doors his name might have opened are already closed. Emma stood very still, watching the battle of wills play out between father and son. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing herself discussed like a business transaction made her stomach turn. If you think I'm going to stand by and let you ruin, the contract is signed. Wyatt's voice went dangerously quiet. Judge Morrison witnessed it. Emma Whitmore is my chosen bride. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with your lawyer and see how far you get breaking a legal agreement because you don't like my choice. James Brooks's hands curled into fists. For a moment, Emma thought he might actually strike his own son. Instead, he turned that cold fury directly on her. "You," he said. "What makes you think you're qualified to be part of this family?" Emma lifted her chin. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to make herself smaller, to disappear like she'd always done. But something in Wyatt's steady presence beside her made her stand taller instead. "I don't think I'm qualified for anything," she said clearly. "But I know how to work. I know how to survive when everything's falling apart. And I know how to keep going when everyone around me says I should quit." She met James Brooks's glare without flinching. "If that's not good enough for this family, then maybe this family isn't as strong as everyone thinks it is." The room went absolutely silent. Wyatt's father stared at her like she'd just slapped him across the face. Then, unexpectedly, something shifted in his expression. Not approval exactly, but a grudging recognition. "You've got a mouth on you," he said finally. "Let's see if you've got the spine to back it up." He turned to Wyatt. "She's your choice, your responsibility. If she fails, it's on you." "She won't fail," Wyatt said simply. James Brooks waved them away with a dismissive gesture. "Get out of my study, both of you." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She walked out of the room with her head high, her hand shaking only slightly. Wyatt followed close behind, closing the door firmly. "That went better than I expected," he said dryly. Emma let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. "Your father hates me." "He hates most people. Don't take it personally." Wyatt started up the grand staircase. "Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying." The guest room in the East Wing was larger than the entire room Emma had shared with Lydia growing up. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in fabric that looked too expensive to touch. A wardrobe stood against one wall, and large windows overlooked the ranch's sprawling pastures. "This is too much," Emma said quietly. "You'll get used to it." Wyatt leaned against the doorframe. "Dinner's at 7. My father expects everyone to attend, even when he's angry. Wear whatever you're comfortable in. I don't care if it's the dress you rode in with." "I only have 2 dresses, this one and one that's even worse." "Then wear this one." Wyatt's expression softened slightly. "Emma, I meant what I said earlier. I'm not expecting you to be something you're not. Just be yourself. That's all I need." He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Emma sank onto the edge of the massive bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd left everything she knew, walked away from her family, and tied herself to a man she barely understood. But for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her, not despite her rough edges and calloused hands, but because of them. That had to count for something. It had to be worth the risk she'd just taken. Emma stood and walked to the window, watching the sun set over land that would somehow become part of her future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new reasons to doubt herself. But tonight, she was exactly where she'd chosen to be, and that would have to be enough. She was still standing at the window when someone knocked. Emma turned to find a woman in her 50s standing in the doorway, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression neutral but not unkind. "I'm Margaret. I run the household staff." The woman's eyes swept over Emma's dusty dress. "Mr. Brooks asked me to bring you something suitable for dinner. May I come in?" Emma nodded, stepping back. Margaret entered carrying a dark blue dress that looked far more expensive than anything Emma had ever owned. This belonged to Wyatt's mother.
She was about your size.
Margaret laid the dress carefully on the bed. Mr. Brooks Sr. doesn't know I kept it. He had me burn most of her things after she passed. Why are you giving it to me? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Because Wyatt chose you. And that boy hasn't made a choice for himself in 10 years. Whatever else happens, you represent something his father can't control. And that's worth protecting. She moved toward the door. Dinner's in 20 minutes. Don't be late. James Brooks uses punctuality as a weapon. Emma stared at the dress after Margaret left. The fabric was finer than anything she'd touched. But it wasn't ostentatious. It was the dress of a woman who'd had money, but hadn't needed to prove it. She changed quickly, her fingers fumbling with buttons she wasn't used to. The dress fit almost perfectly, settling against her shoulders like it had been waiting for her. Emma caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman looking back wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. She wasn't sure who she was, but she was someone different. The dining room was exactly what Emma expected. A table long enough to seat 20 people, crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across white linens, and more silverware than any meal should require. James Brooks sat at the head of the table, his face carved from granite. Wyatt sat to his right, and Margaret had placed Emma directly across from Wyatt, putting her in James's direct line of sight. "You're 2 minutes late," James said as Emma entered. "Then I apologize for those 2 minutes." Emma sat down without waiting for permission. "It won't happen again." James's eyebrows rose slightly. Wyatt's mouth twitched in what might have been approval. A younger man Emma hadn't met yet sat near the far end of the table, watching the exchange with obvious interest. "This is Cole Mackenzie," Wyatt said, nodding toward the stranger. "He manages the western pastures and thinks he's funnier than he actually is." Cole grinned. "I'm also the one who keeps this place running when Wyatt's off making impulsive decisions." "Nice to meet you, Emma. You're already more interesting than anyone expected." "That's not saying much," James muttered. Margaret and another woman began serving dinner. The food was simple, but well prepared. Roast beef, potatoes, vegetables that had clearly come from a garden nearby. Emma waited until everyone else started eating before picking up her fork, aware that every movement was being watched and judged. "So," Cole said, after a few minutes of tense silence, "how exactly did you end up here instead of your sister? The whole town's been talking about it." "Cole," Wyatt's voice carried a warning. "What? It's a fair question. Richard Whitmore spent 6 months telling anyone who'd listen that Lydia was going to marry into the Brooks family. Now Emma's here instead. People are curious." Emma set down her fork carefully. "My sister is beautiful and refined and everything a wealthy man should want. I'm none of those things. Wyatt chose me anyway. If people want to talk about it, they can talk all they want. Won't change anything." "You think being chosen once means you've won something?" James said. "Let me tell you what you've actually won. You've won a position you're not qualified for, expectations you can't possibly meet, and the attention of every social climber in the territory who'll be watching for you to fail. Good thing I'm used to people expecting me to fail." Emma met his gaze head-on. "I've been doing it my whole life." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Wyatt's hand tightened around his water glass, but he didn't interrupt. Cole looked between Emma and James like he was watching a card game where the stakes had just gotten interesting. "Your father sent a message this afternoon," James continued. "He wants to discuss adjusting the marriage contract. Seems he's changed his mind about which daughter he wants to sacrifice to our family's ambitions." Emma's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the contract stands as written. One daughter in exchange for clearing his debts and salvaging what's left of his reputation. James's smile was sharp enough to cut. I didn't specify that we'd honor his preference about which daughter that would be. Why are you doing this? Emma asked quietly. You don't want me here. You made that clear. Why not let my father change the contract? Because I keep my agreements, even when they're inconvenient. And because watching you struggle might be entertaining. James returned to his dinner. Besides, if you fail spectacularly enough, I can use it as leverage to get better terms on my next business deal with your father. Wyatt's fork clattered against his plate. That's enough. Is it? I don't think it is. James leaned back in his chair. You brought her here, Wyatt. You tied our family's reputation to a girl who probably can't tell the difference between a salad fork and a dessert fork. You want to play house with someone you picked because she was carrying firewood? Fine. But don't expect me to pretend this was anything other than a massive mistake. Emma pushed back from the table and stood. Every eye turned to her, but she focused only on James Brooks. You're right. I can't tell the difference between your fancy forks. I don't know which dress to wear to which social event, and I'll probably embarrass you in front of your business partners. Her voice stayed level, controlled. But I know how to work until my hands bleed. I know how to keep going when everyone says I should quit. And I know the difference between a man who builds something worth having and a man who just wants people to think he has. She turned to Wyatt. Thank you for dinner. I'll eat in my room from now on. Emma walked out before anyone could respond, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She made it to her room and closed the door before her hands started shaking. 10 minutes later, Wyatt knocked. I'm fine, Emma called out. I know you're not. The door opened. Wyatt stepped inside, his expression tight with anger that clearly wasn't directed at her. My father was out of line. Your father was honest. He doesn't want me here, and he's not going to pretend otherwise. Emma sat on the edge of the bed. Maybe he's right. Maybe I don't belong here. Stop. Wyatt's voice went hard. Don't let him get in your head. That's what he does. He finds the thing you're most afraid of and uses it like a knife. Then he must have a lot of knives, because I'm afraid of just about everything right now. Wyatt crossed the room and crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. Tomorrow morning, we're riding out to check the northern fence line. It's a full day's work, hard riding, harder repairs. You're coming with me. Why? Because you need to see what this place actually is, instead of sitting in this house letting my father convince you you're not good enough. Wyatt's jaw tightened. And because I need you to see that I didn't bring you here to torture you. I brought you here because I meant what I said. I need a partner, not someone who's going to fold the first time someone's cruel to them. I'm not folding. Then prove it. Be ready to ride at dawn. Wyatt stood. And Emma? My father's wrong about a lot of things, but he's right about one. People are going to watch you, waiting for you to fail. So don't give them the satisfaction. He left before she could respond. Emma sat in the silence of her too-large room and let the weight of the day finally catch up to her. She'd left one impossible situation and walked straight into another. But at least this time, she'd made the choice herself. Dawn came cold and sharp. Emma woke to find Margaret had left riding clothes outside her door. Sturdy pants, a thick shirt, and boots that actually fit. She dressed quickly, braided her hair back tight, and made her way down to the barn where Wyatt was already saddling 2 horses. You showed up, he said, without looking at her. You told me to. Most people don't do what I tell them just because I tell them to. Wyatt handed her the reins to a gray mare. This is Juniper. She's stubborn but reliable. Kind of like you. Emma took the reins. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. Come on, we're burning daylight. They rode out as the sun broke over the horizon. painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. The ranch stretched farther than Emma had realized, rolling hills and fenced pastures giving way to rougher terrain the farther they went. Wyatt rode like he'd been born in the saddle, his movements efficient and confident. "How much land do you actually have?" Emma asked after an hour of silence. "About 15,000 acres. Most of it's grazing land for cattle. We've got 3 line camps scattered across the property, where the hands stay during roundup." Wyatt pointed toward a distant ridge. "The northern fence line runs along that ridge. It's the most vulnerable to weather damage and the hardest to maintain." "Why are we checking it today?" "Because I need to know it's secure before the spring storms hit, and because I needed an excuse to get you out of that house before my father says something that makes you leave." Emma glanced at him sharply. "You think I'd leave that easily?" "I think you're tougher than most people give you credit for, but I also think you've spent your whole life being told you're not good enough. My father's an expert at finding those wounds and making them worse." Wyatt's expression stayed neutral. "I'm not going to let him do that to you." They reached the northern fence line by mid-morning. True to Wyatt's prediction, several sections had been damaged by winter storms, posts leaning at dangerous angles and wires sagging nearly to the ground. "We need to replace these 4 posts and restring the wire." Wyatt dismounted and started unloading tools from his saddlebag. "You ever do fence work before?" "Every summer since I was 12. My father couldn't afford to hire help, so Lydia supervised while I did the actual work." Something flickered across Wyatt's face. Anger, maybe, or recognition. "Then you know what you're doing. Let's get started." They worked in tandem, falling into a rhythm that surprised Emma with its ease. Wyatt didn't treat her like she was fragile or incompetent. He handed her tools, accepted her suggestions, and worked alongside her like they'd been doing this together for years. 2 hours in, Emma's hands were blistered and her shoulders ached, but the fence was taking shape. Wyatt pulled off his hat and wiped sweat from his forehead, studying their progress. "You're faster than half my regular crew," he said. "I told you I know how to work." Knowing how and actually doing it are different things. Wyatt picked up the wire cutters. "Most women I know would have quit an hour ago." "Most women you know probably weren't raised to believe work was the only thing that made them valuable." The words came out harder than Emma intended. Wyatt set down the wire cutters and turned to face her fully. "Is that what your father taught you? That your value was just in how much work you could do?" Emma's hands tightened around the fence post she was holding. "My father taught me that I wasn't Lydia, and that meant I had to be useful in other ways. So I learned to be useful. I learned to work harder, longer, better than anyone expected. I learned to make myself indispensable, so maybe he'd notice me." "Did it work?" "No. He still sent me to the barn to hide while he showed Lydia off to you." Emma forced herself to release the post before she broke it. "But at least when you chose me, I knew it was because I could actually contribute something, not just because I looked pretty in a dress." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd heard it before. "My mother used to say that people who define themselves by their usefulness forget they're allowed to just exist." Took me years to understand what she meant. "What did she mean?" "She meant that you're worth something just by being here, not because of what you can do or how hard you work, just because you exist." Wyatt picked up his hat and settled it back on his head. "You don't have to earn your place here, Emma. You already have it." The words hit Emma harder than she expected. She turned away quickly, pretending to examine the fence line, blinking back the sudden burning in her eyes. They finished the repairs in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Comfortable, almost companionable. "We should head back," Wyatt said finally. "It's a 2-hour ride, and I don't want to be caught out here after dark." They were an hour from the main house when they spotted the rider approaching fast. Cole pulled his horse to a stop in front of them, his expression grim. "We've got a problem," he said. "Richard Whitmore showed up about an hour ago with Lydia. They're at the house with your father, and it's not going well." Emma's stomach dropped. "What do they want?" "They want you to come home. They're claiming Wyatt coerced you into leaving, that you didn't understand what you were agreeing to." Cole's eyes flicked to Wyatt. "Your father's enjoying the whole thing way too much. He's letting Richard dig himself into a hole while Lydia stands there looking like a tragic painting." "We need to get back," Emma said quietly. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "You don't have to face them if you don't want to. I can handle this." "No, they came here for me. I need to be the one who tells them to leave." They rode hard the rest of the way. Emma's heart pounded with each mile, her mind racing through everything she wanted to say and everything she should probably keep to herself. By the time they reached the main house, the sun was setting, painting the confrontation ahead in shades of red and gold. Richard Whitmore stood on the front porch with James Brooks, both men locked in what looked like a tense negotiation. Lydia sat on the porch swing, her perfect posture somehow making her look even more fragile and wronged. Emma dismounted and handed Juniper's reins to one of the stable hands. She walked toward the porch with Wyatt beside her, every step feeling like walking into battle. "Emma!" Her father's voice cracked with false relief. "Thank God. I've come to take you home where you belong." "I am home," Emma said clearly. "This is where I chose to be." Richard's expression hardened. "You were coerced. This man took advantage of your innocence and your desperation to escape your responsibilities. But it's not too late. We can fix this. Lydia has agreed to take your place." Emma looked at her sister. Lydia met her gaze with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. Hurt, anger, desperation, all mixed together. "Is that what you want, Lydia?" Emma asked. "You want to marry a man you've never spoken to just to save Father's estate?" "I want to do my duty to our family," Lydia said, her voice steady but strained. "Something you clearly don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You want me to come back so you can pretend everything's fine? So Father can use you like a bargaining chip? So you can keep playing the role of perfect daughter while I disappear into the background again?" Emma's voice stayed level. "But I'm done disappearing. I made my choice. I'm staying." "You're being selfish," Lydia stood, her composure finally cracking. "You don't love him. You barely know him. You're just running away from your responsibilities because you're too weak to face them." "Maybe I am running, but at least I'm running towards something I chose instead of something Father decided for me." Richard stepped forward. "If you don't come back willingly, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. The contract specified one daughter. It didn't specify which one. If you refuse to honor your family's agreement, the contract has been honored," James Brooks interrupted smoothly. "One daughter, married to my son, in exchange for clearing your debts. Emma Whitmore is that daughter. If you want to argue that point, we can bring Judge Morrison here and let him explain contract law to you. This isn't about the law. This is about what's right." Richard's face flushed dark red. "Emma isn't equipped for this life. She'll fail, and when she does, it'll reflect poorly on both our families. Lydia is the sensible choice." "Then you should have been more specific in your contract," Wyatt said coldly. "Emma stays, you leave. End of discussion." Lydia's perfect mask finally shattered completely. "You chose her because she's broken enough to be grateful. You chose her because you knew she'd do whatever you wanted just to feel like someone wanted her. But she's lying to you, Wyatt. She doesn't want this. She's just too scared to admit she made a mistake." Emma's hands curled into fists. "You don't know what I want, Lydia. You never bothered to ask. You were too busy being exactly what Father needed you to be." "And you were too busy resenting me for it," Lydia's voice rose. "You think I don't know how you looked at me, like I was the enemy? I never asked to be the favorite. I never asked for any of this. But you took it anyway. You took everything Father offered you and never once questioned whether it was fair. Never once asked why I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Emma's voice broke slightly. So don't stand there and tell me I don't know what I want. For the first time in my life, I chose something for myself. That's more than you've ever done. The silence that followed felt like the eye of a storm. Richard looked between his daughters, his face twisted with fury and something that might have been shame. James Brooks watched the whole thing with obvious satisfaction. "If you stay here, you're no daughter of mine," Richard said finally. Emma forced herself to stay steady. "You made that decision the day Mother died, and you decided only Lydia mattered. I'm just finally accepting it." "Get off my property," Wyatt said quietly. "Both of you. And don't come back." Richard grabbed Lydia's arm and pulled her toward their carriage. Lydia looked back once, her eyes meeting Emma's. For just a second, Emma saw something in her sister's expression that looked almost like understanding. Or maybe envy. Then the moment passed, and they were gone, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Emma's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, her whole body shaking. Wyatt sat beside her, not touching her, just present. "You all right?" he asked after a while. "No," Emma said honestly. "But I will be." James Brooks stood over them both. "That was quite a performance. Very dramatic. Now let's see if you can actually survive what comes next." He walked into the house, leaving Emma and Wyatt alone in the fading light. "He's right, you know," Emma said quietly. "This is just the beginning. There'll be more tests, more people waiting for me to fail." "I know." Wyatt's shoulder pressed against hers, solid and warm. "But you don't have to face them alone. That's the whole point of this arrangement, remember? Partnership." Emma let out a shaky breath. She'd burned every bridge back to her old life. There was no going back now, no safety net, no second chances. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. Maybe burning those bridges was the only way to build something new. She just had to hope she was strong enough to survive what came next. The next morning, Emma woke to find Margaret shaking her shoulder gently. "You're needed in the barn. One of the horses is foaling, and it's not going well. Wyatt asked for you specifically." Emma was dressed and out the door in less than 5 minutes, her hair still tangled from sleep. The barn was lit by lanterns, and she could hear a horse's distressed sounds before she even stepped inside. Wyatt was kneeling beside a laboring mare, his hands covered in blood, his face tight with concentration. "She's been at this for 3 hours. The foal's turned wrong." He didn't look up. "I need someone with smaller hands to help guide it. Can you do this?" Emma dropped to her knees beside him without hesitation. "Tell me what you need." For the next 40 minutes, they worked together in tense silence, Emma's hands following Wyatt's instructions exactly, feeling for the foal's position, gently coaxing it into the right angle. The mare thrashed and screamed, and Emma's arms shook with exhaustion, but she didn't stop. "Almost there," Wyatt said. "One more push. Guide the front legs out first." Emma did exactly as he said. The foal slipped free in a rush of fluid and relief, landing in the straw with a wet thud. For a terrible moment, it didn't move. Then it shuddered, took a gasping breath, and lifted its head. "You did it," Wyatt said quietly. Emma sat back on her heels, her arms trembling, her shirt soaked with blood and birth fluid. "We did it." Wyatt's eyes met hers, and something shifted between them. Not romance exactly, but recognition. Trust earned through action instead of words. "Go clean up," he said. "Then meet me in the kitchen. You've earned breakfast." Emma washed in the barn's water trough, scrubbing the blood from her hands and arms until her skin was raw. When she entered the main house's kitchen, she found Wyatt already there with coffee and eggs waiting. He'd cleaned up too, his hair still damp. "You didn't flinch," he said as she sat down. "Most people can't handle that kind of work." "I grew up on a ranch. I've seen worse," Your father had you doing that kind of work?
My father had me doing every kind of work. Lydia was too delicate for anything that might ruin her hands.
Emma picked up her coffee.
I stopped resenting it after a while.
At least when I was working, I knew what was expected of me. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. You know you don't have to prove anything to me, right? You already did that when you left with me instead of staying safe. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. I'm trying to prove something to myself. Emma met his gaze steadily. I spent 23 years being told I wasn't enough. I need to know that's not true. Before Wyatt could respond, James Brooks walked into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw them sitting together, his expression darkening. The mare survived? He asked. Both mare and foal are fine, Wyatt said. Emma helped. How convenient. The ranch hand wife makes herself useful. James poured himself coffee. I have business associates arriving next week for dinner. They're considering investing in our cattle operation. Emma will be expected to attend and behave appropriately. Emma's stomach tightened. What does appropriately mean? It means you'll wear a proper dress, sit quietly, and not embarrass this family with your lack of social graces. Think you can manage that, or should I just tell them you're indisposed? She'll be there, Wyatt said before Emma could answer, and she'll be fine. James's smile was cold. We'll see about that. He left the kitchen, taking all the warmth with him. Emma stared down at her coffee, her appetite gone. Don't let him get to you, Wyatt said. Easy for you to say. He's not constantly testing you. He's been testing me my entire life. I just learned to stop caring whether I passed his tests or not. Wyatt pushed his plate away. Look, this dinner next week is important, but not for the reasons my father thinks. These investors are looking at 3 different ranches. If we don't get their money, we'll have to sell off part of the herd to cover operating costs. That's the real test, not whether you know which fork to use. Emma's hands tightened around her coffee cup. So if I mess this up, the ranch suffers. If you mess this up, we find another way. That's how partnership works. Wyatt stood. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her out to the eastern pasture, where the sun was just starting to burn off the morning mist. A dozen horses moved through the grass, their coats gleaming in the early light. This is what I actually care about, Wyatt said. Not my father's business deals or his social climbing. These horses, this land, building something that matters instead of just making money. He turned to face her. My father wants to use this ranch to prove he's important. I want to use it to prove I can create something worth having. There's a difference. What do you need me for in all of this? Because creating something alone is just work. Creating it with someone else is what makes it matter. Wyatt's voice went quiet. My mother understood that. She and my father used to work this ranch together before she got sick. After she died, he forgot why any of it mattered. He just focused on making it bigger, making it profitable, making it impressive. But he lost the part that made it worth doing. Emma watched the horses moving through the pasture, the morning light turning everything gold. You're afraid you'll end up like him. I know I will, if I'm not careful. That's why I needed someone who understands that work isn't the same as purpose. Wyatt picked up a piece of grass and twisted it between his fingers. You could have stayed with your family. You could have made the easy choice, but you didn't. That tells me you understand the difference. Before Emma could respond, Cole came riding up fast, his expression urgent. We've got a problem at the Western Line camp. Someone's been cutting fence wire and running off cattle. Marcus found tracks heading toward the Dawson property. Wyatt's entire demeanor changed. How many head are missing? At least 20, maybe more. We won't know until we do a full count. Get a crew together. We ride out in 15 minutes. Wyatt turned to Emma. You should stay here.
Not a chance. If someone's stealing from this ranch, I want to know who and why." Wyatt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but you follow my lead and you don't take risks. Understood?" They rode out with 6 ranch hands, following the trail Cole had found. The tracks led west for miles, crossing into rougher territory where the grass gave way to rock and scattered pines. Emma's back ached from the hard riding, but she didn't complain. Around her, the men rode with rifles in hand, their faces grim. "The Dawsons have been trying to buy this land for years," Cole explained as they rode. "James keeps refusing. This could be their way of making life difficult enough that he changes his mind." "Or it could be simple rustling," another hand said.
"Plenty of people out here would steal cattle just because they can." They found the cattle in a box canyon on what was technically Dawson land, penned in with temporary fencing. 3 men stood guard, and they reached for their guns the moment they saw Wyatt's group approaching. "That's far enough, Brooks," one of them called out. "You're on Dawson property now." Wyatt pulled his horse to a stop, his hand resting casually on his own rifle. "Those are my cattle. You want to explain why they're on your land?" "Found them wandering. Figured we'd hold them until someone came looking. Call it a finder's fee for doing your job for you." "Finder's fee for cattle that crossed onto your land through fence wire you cut?" Cole's voice was hard. "We found the wire, fresh cuts. Want to explain that?" The tension ratcheted up instantly. Emma's heart pounded as hands moved toward weapons on both sides. This was going to turn into a fight, and people were going to get hurt.
"Wait," she said loudly.
Every head turned toward her. Wyatt's jaw tightened, but he didn't tell her to be quiet. Emma rode forward slowly, her hands clearly visible. "You're holding 20 head of cattle that don't belong to you. That's rustling. Rustling's a hanging offense in this territory. But if you just made a mistake, if you genuinely thought these cattle wandered onto your land through broken fence that you didn't cut, then this can end differently." "And how's that?" one of the men asked. "You let the cattle go. We repair the fence. Everyone goes home alive. No charges filed, no blood spilled. No one has to explain to a judge why they thought theft was worth dying over." Emma's voice stayed calm. "Or you can pull those guns and see who's still standing when it's over. Your choice." The men looked at each other. Emma could see them weighing their options, calculating odds, trying to decide if defending stolen cattle was worth the risk.
"The lady makes a good point," the first man said finally. "We made a mistake. Thought they were strays. We'll open the gate." Wyatt's eyes never left the men as they opened the temporary pen and let the cattle through. The whole process took 10 minutes that felt like hours, every second balanced on a knife's edge of potential violence. Only when they were a mile away, with the cattle safely recovered, did Wyatt finally speak. "That was either really smart or really stupid. I haven't decided which yet." "It worked, didn't it?" "This time. Next time they might not be interested in talking." Wyatt's voice was tight. "You could have gotten yourself killed. So could you. At least my way, nobody died." Emma met his glare with her own. "You said you wanted a partner. Partners don't sit quietly when there's a better solution." Cole laughed. "She's got you there, boss." Wyatt's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, she does." They got the cattle back to the ranch by late afternoon. James was waiting in the yard, his face like a thunderstorm. "I heard what happened. You risked the lives of 6 men and our cattle to avoid a fight with the Dawsons?" He focused on Emma. "This was your idea, I'm told." "It was the right call," Wyatt said before Emma could answer. "We got the cattle back without losing anyone. That's a win." "That's weakness. The Dawsons will see it as an invitation to try again." James turned to Emma. "You think being soft makes you useful? All you've done is show them we're afraid to fight." I showed them we're smart enough not to die over 20 head of cattle when talking works just as well, Emma said. Being willing to fight and being eager to fight are different things. You know nothing about running a ranch or dealing with men like the Dawsons. You're a girl playing at being useful, and eventually, that's going to cost us more than cattle. That's enough. Wyatt's voice went cold. Emma made the right call.
If you have a problem with how I run my operation, we can discuss it. But you don't get to tear her down for making a decision that saved lives. James's eyes narrowed. Your operation? This ranch is mine. Everything here is mine, including the mistakes you make because you're thinking with something other than your head. He walked away, leaving the accusation hanging in the air. Emma felt her face burn, but she forced herself to stay composed. He's wrong, Wyatt said quietly. Doesn't matter if he's wrong. He's your father, and he owns this ranch. If he decides I'm more trouble than I'm worth, then I'll deal with it. He doesn't control this, Emma. He doesn't control us. But as Emma watched James disappear into the house, she wasn't so sure. This ranch was his kingdom, and she was an intruder he'd never wanted here in the first place. The week leading up to the investors' dinner passed in a blur of work and tension. Emma threw herself into ranch tasks, learning the rhythms of the operation, memorizing which hands handled which responsibilities. Wyatt worked beside her most days, teaching her things she'd never learned at her father's smaller operation. They fell into an easy partnership, finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. But the dinner loomed over everything like a storm cloud waiting to break. Margaret helped Emma prepare, teaching her which dresses were appropriate for which occasions, how to navigate formal dinner conversation, when to speak, and when to stay silent. Emma absorbed it all, but the anxiety sat heavy in her stomach. "You'll do fine," Margaret said the evening before the dinner. "Just remember, these men are coming here to evaluate the ranch, not you. Don't let James make you think otherwise." But when the investors arrived the next evening, it was clear James had other plans. He introduced Emma to the three businessmen with barely concealed disdain. "This is my son's wife, Emma. She's recently joined our family from more modest circumstances." The words were designed to wound, and they hit their mark. Emma felt herself shrinking, becoming invisible again, the girl who wasn't good enough. Then she felt Wyatt's hand on the small of her back, steady and solid. "Emma's been invaluable to the operation," Wyatt said smoothly. "She helped save a foaling mare last week and recovered stolen cattle without bloodshed. We're lucky to have her." One of the investors, a man named Harrison, with sharp eyes and graying hair, studied Emma with interest. "Recovered cattle? That sounds like a story worth hearing." Emma glanced at James, who was watching her with cold calculation. This was a test. He expected her to fumble, to prove she didn't belong. She straightened her spine and met Harrison's gaze directly. "The Dawsons had been cutting our fence line and running off cattle. We tracked them to a box canyon where they had about 20 head penned. Could have turned into a shooting situation, but I suggested we give them a way out instead. They let the cattle go. We repaired the fence. Everyone went home alive." Emma's voice stayed level. "In my experience, keeping your men alive is worth more than proving you're willing to fight." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Smart thinking. Too many ranchers out here lose good workers over pride. How long have you been in the cattle business?" "All my life, though on a smaller scale than this. My father's operation was nothing like what the Brooks family has built." Emma felt Wyatt's hand press slightly against her back, a silent encouragement. "But the principles are the same. Take care of your animals, take care of your land, take care of your people. Everything else follows from that." Wise words. Harrison turned to James. "Your son chose well, it seems." James's smile didn't reach his eyes.
We're still learning what she's capable of. The dinner itself was an endurance test. Emma sat quietly through most of it, speaking only when directly addressed, watching James work his business magic. He painted a picture of a ranch poised for massive expansion, a cattle operation that would dominate the territory. The investors listened, asked questions, probed for weaknesses. It wasn't until dessert that one of them, a younger man named Fletcher, turned to Emma directly. "Mrs. Brooks, you've been quiet through most of this discussion. What's your opinion on your father-in-law's expansion plans?" The table went silent. James's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Wyatt's hand found Emma's under the table, squeezing gently. Emma could play it safe. She could give some vague, supportive answer that meant nothing. Or she could tell the truth. "I think expansion for its own sake is dangerous," she said carefully. "A ranch this size requires constant attention. Adding more land, more cattle, more responsibility, without the infrastructure to support it, is how operations collapse. My father tried to expand beyond what he could maintain, and it nearly destroyed everything he'd built." She met Fletcher's eyes steadily. "Before you expand, you need to make sure what you already have is sustainable. Otherwise, you're just building a bigger house on a weak foundation." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. James's face had gone white with barely contained rage. Wyatt's hand tightened around hers under the table. Then Harrison started laughing. "She's absolutely right," he said, shaking his head. "James, you've been pushing this expansion plan hard, but your daughter-in-law just identified the exact concern we've been dancing around all evening. You're operating at near capacity already. Adding another 5,000 acres would stretch you too thin." James forced a smile. Emma doesn't have access to all the information. She has access to common sense, which is worth more than most financial projections. Harrison set down his wine glass. "I'm interested in investing, James, but not in expansion. I want to invest in stabilizing what you have, making it more efficient, more profitable. That's a better return than gambling on growth you might not be able to handle." Emma watched the negotiation shift in real time. Watched Harrison and the other investors redirect James's ambitious plans into something more reasonable. She'd just undermined James Brooks in front of his potential investors, and she'd done it by telling the truth he didn't want to hear. When the investors finally left several hours later, full of good food and promises to draw up investment contracts, James turned on Emma with cold fury. "How dare you contradict me in front of those men?"
I answered a question honestly.
"You made me look like a fool who doesn't understand his own operation. You made yourself look like someone more interested in ego than sustainability." Emma's fear had burned away, leaving only tired honesty. "They were going to walk away if you kept pushing expansion. I gave them a reason to invest in what you already have. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" James's voice rose. "You're a ranch hand's daughter, playing at being something more. You don't get to have opinions about how I run my business." "Actually, she does." Wyatt stepped between them. "She's my wife. That makes her part of this family and part of this operation. And she was right. You were pushing too hard for expansion, and they could smell the desperation. This is between me and her." "No, it's between you and me. Emma stays. She gets a voice. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's time we talked about dividing this ranch into separate operations." The threat hung in the air like a blade. James stared at his son, his expression shifting through anger to calculation to something that might have been grudging respect. "You'd really split this ranch over her?" "I'd split this ranch over a lot of things. Her being treated with respect is one of them." Wyatt's voice stayed steady. "Your choice, Father. We work together, all three of us, or we work separately. But the days of you controlling everything are over." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward his study without another word. Emma let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her hands were shaking again, adrenaline finally catching up. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." Wyatt turned to face her. "You saved that deal tonight. Harrison was going to walk, and you gave him a reason to stay. My father knows it, even if he won't admit it." He reached out and touched her hand gently. "You belong here, Emma."
Stop waiting for permission to believe that. Emma looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused, hers the same. Hands that had worked together, built something together, fought for something together. Maybe Wyatt was right. Maybe she did belong here. Or maybe she was just starting to believe she deserved to find out. 2 weeks after the investor dinner, Emma was in the barn checking on the new foal when Margaret found her, her expression troubled. "There's a woman at the front gate. She says she's your sister." Emma's hand stilled on the brush she was holding. "Lydia's here?" "She came alone, on foot. She looks—" Margaret hesitated. "She looks like she's been through something hard." Emma's first instinct was to refuse to see her. Lydia had made her choice, standing with their father, condemning Emma for being selfish. But something in Margaret's tone made her set down the brush and walk toward the front gate anyway. Lydia stood outside the property line, clutching a small bag, her perfect hair disheveled, her dress torn at the hem. When she saw Emma, her composure cracked completely. "I didn't know where else to go," Lydia said, her voice breaking. Emma stopped several feet away, keeping distance between them. "What happened?" "Father arranged another marriage. A banker from Denver, who's 53 years old and already buried 2 wives. Lydia's hands shook. "I tried to refuse, but Father said I owed him after you ruined the Brooks arrangement. So I ran. I've been walking for 2 days." Emma's stomach twisted. "You ran away?" "Don't look at me like that, like I'm getting what I deserve." Lydia's eyes flashed with defensive anger. "You don't know what it's been like since you left. Father's creditors are circling. He lost 3 more parcels of land. He's desperate. And I'm the only bargaining chip he has left."
So you want to hide here? Use the family you abandoned as a refuge?
"I want my sister to remember what it felt like to be trapped and offer me the same escape you took." Lydia's voice dropped.
Please, Emma. I know I was awful to you. I know I said terrible things, but I'm begging you."
Emma looked at her sister, really looked at her. Lydia's perfection had always been armor, but now that armor was cracked and falling away, revealing someone just as scared and lost as Emma had been. "Wait here," Emma said finally. She found Wyatt in the stable, going over supply orders with Cole. Both men looked up when she entered, and Wyatt's expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong?"
"Lydia's here. She ran away from home. Father was trying to force her into another marriage."
Emma's words came fast.
"She has nowhere else to go."
Wyatt set down his papers. "What do you want to do?"
"I don't know.
Part of me wants to send her back and let her face the consequences of supporting Father's plans. But part of me remembers what it felt like to be powerless." Cole cleared his throat. "Your father will come looking for her eventually. Having her here could cause problems." "Everything causes problems lately," Wyatt said. "The question is whether those problems are worth it." He turned to Emma. "Is she?" Emma thought about the sister she'd grown up with, before their mother died, before their father started dividing them into useful and ornamental. She thought about the flash of envy in Lydia's eyes the day Emma left, the understanding that maybe Lydia had been just as trapped, just in a different cage. "Yes," Emma said quietly. "She is."
Lydia stayed in the guest room next to Emma's. For the first 3 days, she barely spoke, moving through the house like a ghost, jumping at every sound. Emma watched her sister struggle with the reality of having nothing, being nobody, starting over with only what she could carry. On the 4th morning, Emma found Lydia in the kitchen before dawn, trying to figure out how to work the stove. "I wanted to make coffee," Lydia said, her voice small. "I don't know how." Emma showed her, step by step, the way Margaret had shown her weeks ago. They sat at the kitchen table in silence, drinking coffee as the sun rose. "You were right," Lydia said finally. "About Father. About everything. I spent so long trying to be what he wanted that I forgot to figure out what I wanted. And now I'm 25 years old, and I don't know how to do anything useful." "Then learn. That's what I'm doing. It's different for you. You always knew how to work. I was raised to be decorative." Lydia's voice cracked. "What good am I to anyone like this?" "You're good because you're here, because you chose to leave instead of letting Father sell you to the highest bidder." Emma set down her coffee cup. "That takes courage, Lydia. More than you think." The kitchen door opened. James Brooks stood there, his expression unreadable as he took in both sisters sitting together. "So, the other Whitmore daughter has graced us with her presence," he said. "How convenient. Now we have 2 useless women instead of just 1. "Father," Wyatt's voice came from behind James. "That's enough." "Is it? We're harboring a runaway from a family we have business dealings with. Richard Whitmore will use this against us, and all because your wife has a soft heart for the sister who condemned her." Emma stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "If you have a problem with Lydia staying here, say it directly, instead of hiding behind insults." James's eyes narrowed. "Fine, I have a problem. Your sister represents liability we don't need. Richard will come looking for her, and when he does, it will cause exactly the kind of scene that makes our investors nervous." "Then we'll handle it when he comes," Emma said. "Until then, Lydia stays." "You don't make those decisions here." "Actually, she does." Wyatt stepped fully into the kitchen. "This is her home now. She gets a say in who stays and who goes. If you can't accept that, we can revisit the conversation about splitting the ranch operations." James looked between Wyatt and Emma, his jaw tight. "You're making a mistake, both of you. But fine, let her stay. When this blows up in your faces, don't say I didn't warn you." He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Lydia had gone pale, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "I should go," she said quietly. "I don't want to cause problems for you." "You're not causing problems. He is." Emma sat back down. "And you're staying. I'm not letting Father control either of us anymore." Over the next week, Emma watched her sister slowly come back to life. Lydia started helping Margaret with household tasks, learning to cook and clean, and do the 1,000 small things she'd never been taught. She was terrible at most of it, burning food and breaking dishes, but she kept trying. Emma found herself teaching Lydia the same skills she'd learned through years of being invisible, and something shifted between them. "Why are you helping me?" Lydia asked one afternoon as they worked together to repair a torn saddle. "I was horrible to you. I stood by while Father treated you like you didn't matter." Emma's hands stilled on the leather. "Because I know what it feels like to believe you're worthless. And because somewhere under all Father's manipulation, you're still the sister who used to sneak me extra food when he sent me to bed without dinner." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things, the good and the bad." Emma resumed her stitching. "We can't change what happened, but we can decide what happens next." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She found herself walking through the dark house, her mind racing with everything that had changed. She'd left home to escape being invisible. Now she was responsible for her sister's safety, earning the respect of ranch hands who doubted her, navigating James Brooks's constant tests, and trying to figure out what she actually meant to Wyatt beyond their business arrangement. She found Wyatt on the front porch, staring out at the dark pastures. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked without turning around. Emma sat beside him on the porch swing. "Too much thinking. About Lydia? About everything. A month ago, I was nobody. Now I'm expected to be someone, and I'm not sure I know how." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment.
"You want to know something my mother told me before she died? She said the people who worry about being good enough are usually the ones who are. It's the people who never question themselves you have to watch out for. Your father never questions himself."
"Exactly." Wyatt's voice was soft. "You're nothing like him, Emma. You question everything. You doubt yourself constantly. You work twice as hard as you need to just to prove you deserve to be here. That's what makes you valuable. Not your work ethic or your ability to save cattle or impress investors. You." Emma's throat tightened. "I don't know how to be just me. I've spent so long being what other people needed that I'm not sure who I am without that." "Then maybe it's time to find out." Wyatt turned to look at her directly. "What do you want, Emma? Not what your father wanted, not what I need, not what Lydia needs. What do you actually want?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her that before. Not once in 23 years had anyone cared what she wanted. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never been allowed to want anything." "Then start small. What do you want right now, in this moment?" Emma looked at Wyatt, really looked at him. She saw the man who'd chosen her when he could have had anyone. The man who defended her against his own father. The man who saw her value when she couldn't see it herself. "I want to stop being afraid that this is temporary. That one day you'll realize you made a mistake choosing me." Wyatt's hand found hers in the darkness. "I chose you because you're exactly what I needed. Someone real. Someone strong enough to stand up to my father and smart enough to save a business deal he was about to ruin. Someone who ran toward a hard life instead of away from it." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "That's not temporary, Emma. That's not a mistake." Before Emma could respond, they heard horses approaching fast, multiple riders moving with purpose through the night. Wyatt was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the rifle he kept by the door. Richard Whitmore rode up with 4 men behind him, their faces hard in the lamplight from the porch. "I've come for my daughter," Richard said, his voice cold. "Which one?" Emma asked, stepping forward to stand beside Wyatt. "Don't play games with me, Emma. Lydia belongs at home. She made a foolish mistake running away, but I'm willing to forgive it if she comes back now." "Forgive her for what? Refusing to marry a man 3 times her age?" "Refusing to do her duty to her family, something you're quite familiar with." Richard's eyes were hard. "Bring her out, or I'll come in and get her myself." Lydia appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her voice steady. "I'm not going back, Father." "Yes, you are. I've already made arrangements with Mr. Patterson. The wedding is scheduled for next month, and you will be there." "No, I won't." Lydia's hands clenched into fists. "I'm done being sold to fix your mistakes." Richard's face darkened with rage. "You ungrateful. I raised you, clothed you, gave you everything. You made me into a commodity, something to trade for business deals and social standing. That's not love, Father. That's ownership." Lydia's voice shook, but didn't break. "And I'm done being owned. If you don't come back right now, you're no daughter of mine." "Good, because I don't want to be." Lydia stepped out onto the porch beside Emma. "Emma was right to leave. She was brave enough to do it first,
And I'm finally brave enough to do it now.
Richard turned his fury on Emma. This is your fault. You poisoned her against her own family, turned her into a traitor.
I gave her an example, Emma interrupted. I showed her that leaving is possible. What she does with that information is her choice, not mine.
You think hiding behind the Brooks family will protect you? Both of you? Richard's smile was cruel. James Brooks is using you for his own purposes, Emma. And when he's done, he'll discard you, just like I did. You're nothing but a pawn in his games.
Maybe I am, Emma said quietly. But at least here, I get to choose which games I play. And Lydia gets the same choice. Richard looked between his daughters, his expression shifting through rage to something that might have been grief. You're both dead to me. When you come crawling back, and you will, don't expect forgiveness. He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the darkness, leaving silence behind. Lydia sank down onto the porch steps, her whole body shaking. Emma sat beside her, and for the first time since they were children, Lydia leaned against her shoulder and cried.
We're really alone now,
Lydia said through her tears.
No family, no home, nothing.
We have each other, and we have this place, for now. Emma wrapped an arm around her sister.
That's more than we had before.
Wyatt stood nearby, giving them space but staying close enough to be there if needed. Cole appeared from the bunkhouse, rifle in hand, followed by several other ranch hands. "Everyone all right?" Cole asked. "We're fine," Wyatt said. "Richard Whitmore won't be back tonight. But increase the watch rotation anyway, just in case." As the men dispersed, Emma helped Lydia back inside and up to her room. Margaret was waiting with tea and quiet sympathy. Emma left them together and found Wyatt in the hallway.
"Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting Lydia stay, for standing with us against my father."
"You don't have to thank me for doing what's right." Wyatt's expression was serious. "But Emma, you need to understand something. Your father was partially correct. My father is using this marriage for his own purposes.
The investors, the social standing, the business deals, that's all part of his plan. I chose you because I wanted a partner, but he approved it because he thought he could control it." Emma's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that we need to be careful. My father's tolerance for you challenging him has limits. He let you stay after the investor dinner because it worked out in his favor. But if something goes wrong, if you become more liability than asset in his eyes," Wyatt's voice trailed off, "he'll find a way to get rid of me. He'll try, but he'll have to go through me first." Wyatt's jaw set in a hard line. "Just be aware that the battles aren't over. They're just beginning." The next morning, Emma woke to find a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words made her blood run cold. "The Brooks Ranch is built on borrowed time and broken promises. Ask Wyatt about the water rights dispute with the northern ranchers. Ask him why his father is so desperate for investor money. Ask him what happens when the truth comes out about the land deals that made this empire possible. Then ask yourself if you've chosen freedom or just a prettier cage." The letter was unsigned. Emma's hands shook as she read it twice more. This was either someone trying to drive a wedge between her and Wyatt, or it was a warning about something real. Either way, she needed answers. She found Wyatt in the barn, already working despite the early hour. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" Emma handed him the letter. She watched his face as he read it, watched the way his jaw tightened and his eyes went cold. "Who gave you this?" he asked. "I don't know. It was under my door this morning." Emma's voice was steady, despite her racing heart. "Is any of it true?" Wyatt was quiet for a long moment.
Then he set the letter down and met her eyes directly. "Yes," he said. "Some of it's true. The water rights dispute is real. My father's been fighting with the northern ranchers for 3 years over access to the creek that runs through both properties. And yes, we need the investor money because we're more leveraged than we should be. My father expanded too fast, took on too much debt, and now we're trying to dig our way out." Emma's stomach twisted. "What about the land deals, the broken promises?" "I don't know. My father handles most of the business negotiations. He doesn't include me in everything." Wyatt's expression was troubled. But I wouldn't put it past him to cut corners or make promises he didn't intend to keep. He's more interested in building an empire than maintaining his integrity. So I left one desperate, failing ranch for another one that's just better at hiding it. No, you left a ranch being run by a man who sees people as tools to be used. You came to a ranch where at least one person sees you as a partner worth protecting.
Wyatt stepped closer. "My father's methods might be questionable, but this ranch is viable. We have the land, the cattle, the infrastructure. We just need to stabilize the finances and resolve the water dispute. That's not the same as your father's situation. But it's still built on things you're not proud of." "I'm not proud of a lot of things my father's done. That's why I'm trying to do things differently. That's why I chose you instead of following his plan. That's why I defended you when he wanted to tear you down." Wyatt's voice went quiet. "I can't change what he's built this ranch on, Emma. But I can change what it becomes. We can change it. Together." Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just another version of the trap she'd escaped. But the letter had planted seeds of doubt that wouldn't be easily uprooted. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. But Emma?" Wyatt waited until she looked at him. "Whoever sent that letter wants to divide us. Don't let them win." Emma spent the day working alone, avoiding both Wyatt and Lydia, trying to sort through the tangled mess of her thoughts. She'd risked everything to come here, burned every bridge back to her old life. If this ranch was just another failing enterprise held together by her father-in-law's desperation and questionable deals, what did that make her choice? She was mucking out stalls when Cole found her that afternoon. "Someone's asking for you at the gate," he said. "Says it's important." Emma walked to the front gate to find a woman she'd never seen before, middle-aged and travel-worn, holding a leather satchel. "Emma Brooks?" the woman asked. "Emma Whitmore Brooks, yes." "I'm Sarah Keller. I worked for the Brooks family 15 years ago, before Wyatt's mother died. I have something you need to see." Sarah opened the satchel and pulled out a stack of letters tied with ribbon. "These are letters Catherine Brooks wrote before she passed. She asked me to keep them safe and give them to Wyatt's wife when the time was right. I think that time is now." Emma took the letters with shaking hands. "Why now?" "Because James Brooks is getting desperate, and desperate men do desperate things." Catherine knew what her husband was capable of. She wanted someone to know the truth about this ranch and the choices that built it. Sarah's expression was grave. "Read them. Then decide if you want to stay or run. But make that decision with your eyes open." Sarah left before Emma could ask more questions. Emma stood at the gate, holding a dead woman's letters, feeling the weight of secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to know. But she'd come too far to turn away from the truth now, no matter how ugly it might be. Emma took the letters to her room and locked the door. Her hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and opened the first envelope. Catherine Brooks's handwriting was elegant but hurried, the words of someone who knew time was running out. "To whoever my son chooses to love," the first letter began. "If you're reading this, it means James has continued down the path I feared he would. This ranch was built on my father's land, earned through honest work and fair dealing.
But after I became too sick to manage things, James started cutting corners. He forged water rights documents to claim access to the northern creek. He promised neighboring ranchers partnership deals he never intended to honor. He built this empire on lies, and I was too weak to stop him. Emma's stomach turned as she read letter after letter. Catherine had documented everything. The forged documents, the broken promises, the families James had ruined to expand his holdings. The final letter was dated 3 days before Catherine died. I'm telling you this not to destroy what James built, but to give you the power to change it.
My son is a good man, but he's been shaped by his father's shadow. He needs someone strong enough to stand against James, someone who won't be intimidated or controlled. If you're that person, use this information wisely. Make this ranch into something we can be proud of again. Make it honest. Emma sat back, the letters scattered around her. She had proof that James Brooks's empire was built on fraud. Proof that could destroy the ranch, destroy Wyatt's future, destroy everything. Or proof that could be used to force James to change. She found Wyatt in the stable, his hands busy with repair work that didn't need his attention. He looked up when she entered, his expression guarded. I need to show you something, Emma said. They went to Wyatt's office, a small room off the main barn that smelled of leather and paper. Emma laid out the letters one by one, watching Wyatt's face as he read. She saw shock, then anger, then something that looked like grief.
My mother knew, he said finally, his voice raw. She knew what he was doing, and she couldn't stop him. She wanted us to stop him, or at least make him honest. Emma's hands were steady now. Wyatt, these letters prove your father forged water rights documents. If the northern ranchers knew, it would destroy everything. The ranch, the family name, any hope of investor support. Wyatt ran his hands through his hair. But she's right. We can't keep building on his lies. So what do we do? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought through options. We use it as leverage. We make him choose between doing things honestly going forward or losing everything he's built. He'll never agree to that. Then we make him agree. Wyatt's eyes hardened. My mother gave us ammunition. It's time to use it. They found James in his study, surrounded by ledgers and contracts. He looked up when they entered, his expression darkening when he saw their faces.
What now? Another crisis manufactured by your poor judgment? Wyatt laid the letters on James's desk.
Mother documented everything. The forged water rights, the broken promises, every questionable deal you made while she was too sick to stop you. James's face went white, then red. Where did you get these? Sarah Keller kept them safe, just like Mother asked her to. And now we're going to use them to fix what you broke. Wyatt's voice was steel. You're going to contact the northern ranchers and negotiate a fair water-sharing agreement. You're going to honor the promises you made to neighboring families or compensate them fairly for breaking those promises. And you're going to run this ranch honestly going forward, or we take these letters to Judge Morrison and let the law sort it out. You wouldn't dare. This ranch is your inheritance, your future. I don't want an inheritance built on fraud. I want something I can be proud of.
Wyatt leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. Mother wanted better for this place. Emma wants better. I want better. The only person who doesn't is you, and you're outvoted. James's laugh was bitter. You think you can force me to give up everything I've worked for? I'll fight you on this, Wyatt. I'll tie it up in courts for years. Then you'll spend years explaining to investors why your own son is suing you for fraud. See how many business partners stick around for that? Wyatt straightened. You have 1 week to start making this right. After that, the letters become public. And what about Emma? Does she get a vote in destroying her husband's future? Emma stepped forward. I get a vote in building an honest future.
Your son chose me because I know the difference between real worth and false value. This ranch has real worth. Good land, good cattle, good people working it. That's worth protecting. Your empire built on lies isn't.
James stared at her with something that might have been grudging respect. You've got more spine than I gave you credit for. Doesn't mean you're right.
It doesn't have to mean I'm right. It just has to mean you're willing to change. Emma's voice softened slightly. Your wife wanted this ranch to be something worth passing down. Help us make that happen, or get out of the way. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then James picked up the letters and read through them slowly, his expression unreadable. Catherine was always too idealistic, he said finally. She thought integrity mattered more than success. She thought both mattered, Wyatt corrected. She just knew you couldn't keep one without the other. James set down the letters carefully. 1 week. I'll consider your demands. But don't think this means I approve of either of you or the way you're trying to run my ranch. It's not your ranch anymore, Wyatt said quietly. It's ours. All of ours.
And we're going to build it into something worth having. They left James in his study, surrounded by evidence of his wife's disappointment and his son's determination. Emma's hands shook with released tension, but her voice stayed steady.
Do you think he'll actually do it? She asked once they were outside. I think he'll try to find a way around it first. But between the three of us, you, me, and my mother's ghost, he doesn't have much choice. Wyatt stopped walking and turned to face her. Emma, what you did in there, standing up to him like that, is what you've been doing since I got here. I just finally learned how. Emma managed a shaky smile. Your mother was right. This ranch needs to be something we can be proud of. And I want to be part of making that happen. Even knowing all the ugly truth about how it was built? Especially knowing that. Because now we can fix it instead of just benefiting from it. Emma reached for his hand.
I didn't leave my father's house to hide from hard truths. I left to find something real. This is real. The good and the bad. And I want to be part of making it better.
Wyatt squeezed her hand. Then let's get to work. Over the next 3 days, they worked alongside Cole and the other ranch hands to prepare documentation of all James's questionable land deals. Margaret helped by pulling old contracts from storage, her face grim as she confirmed things Catherine had suspected. Even Lydia helped, her eye for detail catching discrepancies in the paperwork that Emma had missed. On the 4th day, the northern ranchers arrived for a meeting James had reluctantly agreed to schedule. Emma watched from the porch as 5 hard-faced men dismounted, their expressions promising nothing good. The meeting took place in the dining room, with Emma and Wyatt both present, despite James's objections.
The lead rancher, a man named Thomas Garrett, with gray hair and eyes like flint, laid out his grievances one by one. You claimed water rights you never legally owned. You promised to share access and then built barriers. You cost us cattle, crops, and livelihoods while you built your empire. Garrett's voice was controlled fury. Give me one reason we shouldn't take this to court and bury you. James started to speak, but Wyatt cut him off. Because we're offering you something better than a court battle. Fair access to the water, written into a legal agreement that benefits everyone. Compensation for the losses you've suffered, and a partnership going forward instead of competition. Why should we trust anything a Brooks says? Another rancher asked. Emma stood up. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt the weight of their skepticism and anger. Because I'm not a Brooks by blood. I'm a Whitmore, and my father ran his ranch into the ground through greed and poor judgment. I know what it looks like when a man values pride over sustainability. Her voice was clear and strong. Wyatt's trying to do things differently. His mother wanted this ranch run honestly, and so do I. We're offering you a real solution,
not more promises designed to be broken. Garrett studied her for a long moment. And if we agree to this, what guarantee do we have that James won't go back on his word the moment we leave? You have my word, Wyatt said. And you have these documents showing exactly what my father did wrong. If he violates this agreement, you can use them in court with our blessing. We're not protecting his crimes anymore. The ranchers looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. James sat rigid in his chair, his face carved from stone, saying nothing. We'll need to review the proposed agreement, Garrett said finally.
And we want it notarized by Judge Morrison. But if the terms are fair, we're willing to try this your way. The negotiation took another 3 hours, but when the ranchers finally left, they had a preliminary agreement that gave everyone access to the water and established clear boundaries. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that mattered more than perfection. James waited until the ranchers were gone before turning on Wyatt and Emma. You just gave away leverage I spent years building. You handed them power over this ranch's future. We handed them fairness, Wyatt said, and we got stability in return. That's worth more than leverage built on lies. You're naive, both of you. The world doesn't work on fairness and honesty. It works on power and control. Then maybe it's time to change how our world works, Emma said quietly. Starting right here. James looked at her with something that might have been recognition.
You really believe that, don't you? You think you can make this ranch into something noble?
I think we can make it into something sustainable. Something worth passing down to the next generation, without shame. Emma met his gaze steadily. Your wife believed it was possible. I believe it too. James was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Catherine would have liked you, he said, without turning around. She always did prefer stubborn idealists to practical realists. He left without waiting for a response. Wyatt let out a breath. I think that's the closest to approval we're going to get from him. I'll take it. Emma sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Is it always going to be this hard? Probably, but at least we're fighting for something worth having. Wyatt sat beside her. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Emma's heart skipped.
What?
When I chose you at your father's house, it was because I needed a partner, someone strong enough to handle this life. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about need and started being about want. Wyatt's voice was rough. I want you here, Emma, not because you're useful or because you can stand up to my father, but because you make this place feel like a home instead of just a ranch. Because when you're not around, I notice. Because... He stopped, struggling with words. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I need to know if there's any chance you might feel the same. Emma's breath caught. She thought about the man who'd chosen her when no one else saw her worth. The man who'd defended her, trusted her, built something real with her. The man who'd given her space to find herself instead of trying to mold her into what he needed. I was so afraid this would just be another cage, she said quietly. Another place where I'd have to earn my right to exist. But you never made me feel that way. You gave me room to be angry, to be scared, to figure out who I am when I'm not just surviving. She reached for his hand. I don't know if what I feel is love yet, but I know I choose you. I choose this. I choose building something real together instead of hiding from hard truths. And maybe that's what love actually is. Choosing someone every day instead of just feeling something. Wyatt pulled her close, and Emma let herself lean into his strength. It wasn't the perfect romantic moment she'd read about in books. It was better. It was real, earned through struggle and honesty and choosing each other,
when it would have been easier to walk away. They sat together in the quiet dining room, holding each other, until Margaret knocked softly. "The investors are here. They want to discuss finalizing their commitment." Emma and Wyatt stood, still holding hands. They walked together to meet Harrison and the other investors, presenting a united front.
Harrison's sharp eyes took in their joined hands and matching determination. "We've reviewed the preliminary water agreement with the Northern Ranchers. It's going to cost you about 15% of your projected expansion capacity." "We know," Wyatt said, "but it's the right thing to do, and it gives us stability we didn't have before." "Smart thinking. We're prepared to finalize our investment with one condition. We want Emma to have an official role in ranch operations. Her judgment during negotiations has proven valuable, and we want that formalized." Emma's eyes widened. "What kind of role?" "Operations manager. Equal authority with Wyatt on all major decisions. James remains owner, but day-to-day control shifts to both of you." Harrison's expression was serious. "We're investing in the future of this ranch, not its past. You two represent that future." Emma looked at Wyatt, who was trying not to smile. "What do you think?" "I think my mother would approve." Wyatt turned to Harrison. "We accept your terms." The contracts were signed that evening. James witnessed the whole thing in silence, his expression unreadable. When it was done, and the investors had left, he poured himself whiskey and looked at Wyatt and Emma. "Your mother would be insufferably smug about all of this," he said. "She always said the ranch needed someone with spine to keep me honest." He raised his glass slightly. "Congratulations. You've just inherited responsibility for everything I built and all the problems that come with it." "We'll handle it," Emma said. "See that you do." James downed his whiskey. "And Emma, you were right earlier about knowing the difference between real worth and false value. Maybe there's hope for this place after all." It was the closest thing to respect James Brooks had ever offered her, and Emma accepted it for what it was. That night, Emma found Lydia in the garden, staring up at the stars. "Are you staying?" Emma asked. "I don't know. I don't fit here the way you do. I don't know how to work the way you do. Don't know how to stand up to people the way you do." Lydia's voice was soft. "But I'm learning. Margaret's teaching me, and you're teaching me, and for the first time in my life, I'm figuring out who I am without Father telling me." "Then stay. Keep learning. Keep figuring it out." Emma sat beside her sister. "We both spent too long being what other people needed. Maybe it's time we gave each other space to be what we actually are." Lydia leaned her head on Emma's shoulder. "I'm sorry. For everything I said, everything I did, all the times I stood by while Father made you invisible." "I know, and I forgive you." Emma meant it. "We were both trapped in different ways, but we're free now. Let's not waste that." 3 months later, the ranch had transformed. The water agreement with the Northern Ranchers was finalized and working smoothly. James had started honoring his old promises, grudgingly, but genuinely. The investors' money had stabilized the operation, and under Emma and Wyatt's joint management, the ranch was more profitable than it had been in years. Lydia had found her own place, working with Margaret to manage the household, and starting to learn bookkeeping from Cole. She'd never be the ranch hand Emma was, but she'd found value in work she was good at, and that was enough. Emma stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the valley gold and red. Wyatt came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. Emma thought about the question. She thought about the girl who'd stood in her father's barn, invisible and worthless. She thought about the woman who'd taken a chance on a stranger's choice. She thought about everything she'd fought for,
everything she'd built, everything she'd become. "I'm more than happy," she said. "I'm exactly where I chose to be."
And that choice, made freely, defended fiercely, built honestly, was worth more than any empire, any inheritance, any expectation she'd ever been asked to meet. Emma Whitmore Brooks had chosen herself, and in doing so, she'd built a life that was truly hers.